April. We'll go ahead and get started, and we'll start off by roll call. Ms. Lister. All right. Thank you very much. All being present, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item on our agenda, which is executive session. Looking for a motion.
Mr. President, I move the Board of Education of USD 501 recess into executive session for 30 minutes to discuss with leadership confidential employee matters to protect the privacy of the employees to be discussed, and the board will return to open session in the boardroom at 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a motion. Is there a second? Ms. Schmidt with the second. Okay, we'll go ahead and move with that second to a vote. Ms. Lister. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. All right, we will go ahead and start up again. Now that executive session is over. Next item on the list is our Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Anderson.
Yes, sir. We are so excited. Our senior of the month who is here this evening with us. It's been a long time since we've seen a senior is doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Morgan Dean, can you please take the podium, sir? And we will all stand as you prepare to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you take the podium right there.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will ask questions of him later, right? Yeah.
Later, but on the screen is your certificate, and I believe we have a copy here. Normally we come and deliver that when we were virtual, but I believe Dr. Gray has that certificate, or I'll be getting that for you, and you'll get a chance to ask him all kinds of questions about what an amazing student he is at Highland Park.
Okay, we'll wait, put that pin on that. Next item on the list, adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a second? We have a second. Ms. Lister, can we have the roll call? Thank you so much. Moving on to school highlights, Dr. Anderson.
This is our favorite time. Normally I'm doing it from right there. We're going to start off with the video, so please enjoy the video on Mr. Dean, and then we'll get started.
My name is Morgan Dean. I'm a senior at Highland Park High School. I participated in band, football, wrestling, and I've done some track and a little bit of debate too.
Morgan's one of those kids that's just a great overall kid, a real quiet leader. He leads by example, not necessarily vocal. He still impacts his peers in a positive way, and they follow in his example.
Morgan's one of those kids or students that you have that probably fits in a lot of different categories. He does band, he does sports, he does football, wrestling. I've always tried to get him out for track and field. He's kind of been debated on that one. But I've always tried to get him involved, and he likes to be involved, but he also likes his academics. And when you start messing with that, he tends to get a little flustered on the fact that academics is his number one priority. Athletics, which we'd like a lot of kids, is kind of like second priority.
Morgan is quite simply one of the most outstanding students I've ever had. And you know, it's partly that he's very intelligent, he's very hardworking, but Morgan's really exceptional because he isn't just smart and a hardworking kid, he really cares.
I went out there and I started warming up for my last match, and it was like, it kind of hit me, and I just realizing that this is it for wrestling. And then that kind of connected to all sorts of other things, like this is going to be it for the teachers I'm going to see here. It's going to be it for the coaches that I've spent time with here. Right now, I think I'm going to pursue English because I love to write. Like, writing just applies to so many different fields that it's something that I'm going to have a big focus on.
He would like to be an English teacher. I know that much, so he's going to be an English major and then possibly into the teaching field. We really feel like Morgan's going to be one of those kids that comes back to Highland Park and teaches for us, because I've already kind of put that out there for him. I said, if you go and finish your 4-year degree and do become a teacher, come back to Highland Park definitely, and we'll hire you on the spot.
Morgan, be who you are, like you always have been. Morgan, continue to work on your academics, because that'll carry farther than anything else. But wrestling, athletics, and that stuff always plays a factor in that, because it gives you goals, ambitions, and strive to be the best you can be.
Think about what you want to do a lot, because I've done that a lot and it's hard. Not wanting to let people down in certain ways. It's just a good idea to want to balance that without being too focused on one thing.
Well, Mr. Dean, first of all, join me in giving an applause to Mr. Dean as he comes to the podium along with his principal. Come on up, Mr. Dean. I'm going to turn it over to your principal to say a few words. He has something for you, and then we'll proceed with the certificate and then the board.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Board President, Mr. Munoz, and board members, thank you for having us tonight. We appreciate it. Like you saw in the video there, Morgan's just one of those kids that everyone wants to have in their class or be part of their program because he does lead by example, and that's a very positive example. He's just an all-around outstanding kid, academically, athletically, socially. So it's easy to see the reason why we chose him as Student of the Month at Highland Park and for 501. With that, I'll just turn it over to Morgan. We did get you a little gift. So I've had Morgan in my office the past couple of weeks asking where he wanted to go to school, and he's flip-flopped about 5, 6 different times. He told me at one point it's Wichita State, so the gift we got him is yes. Didn't ruin the surprise. So we got him a little something to remember where he's come from. Highland Park, some Highland Park gear, as well as some Wichita State gear, which unfortunately did not arrive due to supply chain issues.
Great to be a Scot. All right.
Absolutely. And it's great to be a Scot, and he's definitely a great Scot. So with that, Morgan Dean.
All right, Mr. Dean, they're going to have some questions for you, so we're going to turn it over to the board to get to know you a little bit. Okay.
Well, congratulations, Mr. Dean. We love being able to get to know students, and you sound like an exceptional young man. Are there questions from colleagues here for Mr. Dean? Yeah, Dr. Schumacher.
Yeah, it sounds like your life is about balancing a lot of different things. And, you know, when you balance those things, sometimes one thing informs another. So what are some of the things that you take away from the activities with wrestling and football band, and when you use that in academics?
I would say the most simple one is to just do your best. I know it's very basic, but when it comes to wrestling, I've always just had pride in the fact that I knew every single time I was going to go out and I was going to be honest about my weaknesses, and I was going to do my best in whatever I was doing. So just using that and applying that to everything just helps me stay honest, helps me improve.
Adam first.
Well, congratulations, young man. You seem like you are really on your way, taking off, going to do some big things in life. And I know your parents are fully supportive of your efforts. I recognize your dad. Good to see you guys. So it looks like you have a passion for writing, which is incredible. And I saw in the video you were looking at a Watchmen graphic novel. Just kind of curious about what sorts of things you enjoy writing about, and maybe what your genre is that you're thinking about doing professionally at some point.
That's kind of a difficult question. I would say I really like to think about people's places in the world. And as long as I wrote a story that reflects that, I feel like it would be in character for the type of thing that I would want to write.
All right. Fair enough. Well, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Ms. Schmidt.
Congratulations to you and mom and dad. You've got to be so proud. You know, raising teenagers is nothing that's easy anymore. So my question to you is, you are obviously a leader among your peers. What kind of advice would you give fellow students as you get ready to go on to college and you leave them behind to step up to your legacy?
I kind of touched on this in the video, but I think it's very important to listen to the people around you, you know, the role models in your life, and to take the lessons from them and apply them to your own life. But at the same time, being able to balance that with your desires. And if that conflicts a little bit, maybe talk to them about it and just be honest. Because I know with things like coaches and things like that,
There are a lot of pressures. They want you to do certain things. And that's just the way they are. But being able to take what they're saying into consideration and still keeping in mind what you would like to do is an important thing to me.
You have a lot of wisdom for a young man.
Ms. Bowie.
So it seems to me you've already passed your first part of your interview for Topeka Public Schools as an educator. So be sure to remember us when you come back. I was wondering if your parents could come and stand beside you. We know that our students that have strong parents that encourage them and drive them forward are one of the big reasons why our students are successful. I was just wondering what your dreams are for him and that you might be able to share with him tonight.
I've always put a heavy emphasis, like he says, being honest and aware of your blind spots and always working to improve on yourself. It doesn't really matter to me. Thank you. It really doesn't matter to me if he pursues writing or if he pursues something else. It's really up to him. I just think that he can do whatever he puts his mind to, and it kind of sounds cliche-ish, but I just know he can do whatever's in front of him. That's that.
I think it's important for him to look back from where he came from, and also when he does, to go ahead and come home, or to do something within his community to bring it back home, because we need more examples. We need more people to come back and take care of home. Take care of home.
I can see why you are such an outstanding young man. All you have to do is look left and look right when you need somebody. They'll be there for you, I can tell.
Ms. Stewart Campbell.
Congratulations, Morgan, and mom and dad for raising such an incredible young man. So as Ms. Bully pointed out, having strong parents who support you, of course, is extremely important to your success. And which leads me to my question of also educators along the way, so elementary school, middle school, high school. Can you just share with us anything that comes to mind of an educator throughout the years who really supported you, any words they may have said or just their actions, or if there's a particular individuals you want to mention, we'd love to hear about that too. Thank you.
I'm really worried I'm gonna leave some out, but some of the few I remember Miss Tegoff. I believe that was maybe third or second. I honestly don't remember right now. Fourth grade, okay. Miss McCormick, I remember her. Miss Waterhouse in the middle school. She was a big influence on me. And in high school, Mr. Maysberger and Mr. Robertson are the two that come to mind.
All right, well, congratulations on this award and recognition. Well deserved, and congratulations to the parents as well. You all have done a great job. Let's give them a round of applause.
Mr. Dean, it says Morgan Dean is April Senior of the Month on April 7th, 2022. We are so proud of you. So, Mr. Dean and family, if you stay around for about 5 minutes, the board will want to take a photo with you. So, and we'll take a 5-minute recess at that time. So if you stay around, your principal and the board will be taking a photo with you, okay? And so if you have a seat for just a moment. Mr. Dean, let me ask you this. Have you already interviewed for your first job 4 years from now? You haven't?
No, I have not.
Wow. Well, Mom, you want him to come back, and we want you to come back too. You can always change your mind later, but I'd love to set up an interview for you. There are about 5 people, at least, that we select to be interviewed 4 years early, something we started when I began 6 years ago. And we offer them a contract, so you would already know that you'd be making 40 something or $50,000. You know that 4 years early, a job waiting for you. And Dr. New, the former principal of Highland Park High, is the director of human resources. So I'd like to make sure that she interviews you on Monday or Tuesday. Will that fit into your schedule, sir?
Yes, I'm sure it should.
Okay, it's for an English position. So you have your first English teaching interview. That is a wow. So should you pass that interview, she will determine, she's a committee of one, if you are offered the opportunity, and you actually will get your contract 4 years early. So congratulations in advance as one of my new teachers 4 years from now.
Thank you.
So, all right. And I think as our proclamation reader in the audience, they're all virtual. Okay. And if you have a seat right there next to your dad, we're going to call you back up in just a moment, Mr. Dean. So for the proclamation reading this evening, this is the week in which we celebrate 3 events. I will want to first mention that in addition to the proclamation, it is Assistant Principal Week. It's not a proclaimed week, but it is the date in which, and the week in which we're celebrating our assistant principals. So they're all on listening, and the videos and the pictures that you saw for those that are online prior to the meeting were of all of our assistant principals. Now for our proclamation, the first one is National School Library Month, and we're going to turn it over to Miss Leopold, who oversees all of our librarians. Miss Leopold?
Yes, this is a proclamation of the Topeka Unified School District number 501, National School Library Month, April 2022. Whereas April 2022 has been designated the 37th Annual National School Library Month, and whereas school libraries provide materials for teachers and students that will encourage growth and knowledge, and whereas school libraries provide books to encourage children to read for pleasure, and whereas school libraries provide materials to meet individual needs, varied interests, abilities, socioeconomic backgrounds, and maturity levels of students served, and whereas school libraries provide materials which reflect the ideas and beliefs of religious, social, political, historical, and ethnic groups and their contributions to world heritage and culture, and whereas school libraries are a fun place for students to go, and all students deserve a well-managed library to provide for free expression and access to ideas. School librarians are responsible for those spaces and have their day of recognition on April 4th, 2022. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Topeka Public Schools Unified School District number 501, Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim April 2022 as National School Library Month.
Thank you, Ms. Leopold. And I'm going to ask you, Ms. Leopold, how many years have you been in Topeka Public Schools?
40 some.
40 some years that she's been serving. And Ms. Leopold, again, that is a hand clap. And Ms. Leopold, can you share how many librarians we have, ma'am?
We have 25. Some of them have 2 schools. We have 6 media clerks. I'm doing this, I always have to count. So we have some half-time positions in the smaller elementary schools, but the middle schools have full-time positions, and so do the high schools.
25 librarians and 6 media clerks. We're going to turn it over to the board if you have a question or two for Ms. Leopold, and then we have 2 more proclamations this evening. Mr. Munoz?
Well, congratulations, Ms. Leopold, on one, the important job that you do in our schools, making sure that our librarians are supported and the work that they do in helping our students. Are there questions from some of the board members here for Ms. Leopold or? Yeah, Ms. Stewart Campbell.
I just have a comment. Our librarians are amazing. So my daughter's like, Mom, I read this book in elementary school. It was about blah, 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 but I want to read it again. I can't remember what it was. So I emailed one of our amazing librarians, and I just said a little of what the book was about. She found the book, and then I was able to tell my daughter, who said, "Oh yeah, that was the book." And then we checked it out, and that's how amazing our librarians are. Anyway, thank you for everything you're doing, our library media specialists.
Absolutely. And I echo that. That thank you not only is extended to you, but all of our librarians, Miss Leopold. And with that, in addition to managing books, they really are media specialists. And so in this day and time, they are technology specialists. They really work with the partnership as well. So every student, when they register for Topeka Public Schools, they actually also get a library card to the Shawnee County Library. So through our librarians, they have access to the world around them. And much of these partnerships were established over your 40-something years, Ms. Leopold. So we thank you for your dedication and service. Any final comment, Ms. Leopold, before we move on to our next proclamation?
Actually, yes. Ahead of the board meeting, we sent a video about what our librarians do that Tiffany Beasley, the head media specialist at Topeka High, put together with help from everybody. And you should all watch that sometime. Because it's really good.
And how about this? With that video, when you do take your 5-minute break, if it pleases the board, we'll have that video playing so that people that are online can enjoy that video. And that way, Ms. Beasley's hard work as well is shown during the board meeting while we're also taking those photos. Additionally, board members, it'll be emailed to you as well. Thank you, Ms. Leopold.
Thank you.
Our next proclamation is for our paraprofessionals. It is Paraprofessional Appreciation Day. It was on April the 6th. We're going to turn it over to one of our para advisory members. We do want you to know that we have a group of paraprofessionals, I think for the last perhaps 4 years that I've been meeting with. That's who advises us about the 500 paraprofessionals that are across the district. So when we're seeking advice about snow days or other matters, this group comes together and gives us, myself and Mr. Robbins, advice. So I'll turn it over to one of our para advisory members to introduce themselves and to read this proclamation.
Hi, I am Vicki Meyer. I'm a paraprofessional at Topeka West High School. I've been there for 18 years. And so the proclamation of Topeka United School District number 501, Paraprofessional Appreciation Day, April 6, 2022.
And Ms. Meyer, can you come any closer to your microphone? And if not, that's okay. We can hear you, but it's very soft. And you can, yes, you can go ahead and continue with the whereas.
Okay. We're at Topeka Public Schools, to home of more than 500 paraprofessionals who provide services in multiple settings within schools, including support for instruction, students' activities, and for the individual students, as well as numerous other tasks that contribute to education success. And whereas the support of services provided by paraprofessionals are integral to student achievements, resulting in even better, more effective learning environments. And whereas Topeka Public Schools committed to excellence in education and recognition, the important role that paraprofessionals play in enduring educational success. And now, therefore, we will be resolved. The Public Schools United District number 501, Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim April 6, 2022 as Paraprofessional Appreciation Day.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer. And Ms. Meyer, you are on not only our peer advisory, but you're also on the advisory for Mr. Robbins as well. Can you share how many years you've been in Topeka? I know you're at Topeka West.
How many total years I've lived in Topeka?
How long have you worked for Topeka Public Schools?
The 18 years I've only been at Topeka West the whole time.
So only 18 years at Topeka West. So the almost 2 decades of experience, we thank you for your work and service in all the committees that you're on. I want to turn it over to Mr. Munoz.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to thank you for all the work that you do as a paraprofessional. We all know that, especially during COVID, that on the front lines were our teachers, and right next to them were paraprofessionals who were doing the work necessary to make sure to keep our kids safe and make sure that they're learning the way as they should. And so thank you for all of your work, for your 18 years of service. Are there a couple of questions for our presenter? No? Yeah, Ms. Bowley.
I don't think I have a question. I just know the power and the excellence that the paraprofessionals bring to our education system. I've worked with a lot of them, and they've been so excellent and such a great support for our students and our teachers and our principals. I always think of them as one of those cornerstones in education, and we're so lucky to have paraprofessionals, and I just want to thank each and every one of them. Our district is very fortunate to be able to fund our paraprofessionals. And so thank you. I'm so glad you're getting this proclamation and the recognition, because it is well deserved.
Absolutely. And with that, Ms. Meyer, is there any final comment you'd like to say before we move on to our final proclamation?
The one thing I would like to say is it's like when you meet one of your students out in the world after they graduate and they walk up and they hug you and said, thank you, you were the one to help me get through it. It makes you feel very, very, I can't put it in words. It just makes you feel so great to know that you helped that student.
Absolutely. And again, thank you, Ms. Meyer, for helping students for 18 years. We so appreciate you. Our final proclamation is for Autism Acceptance Month. We're going to turn it over to our staff member from special education to share a little bit about how many years she's been in the district, as well as what her role is. And then she's going to begin with reading the proclamation. We'll turn it over to our staff. And Dr. Harrington, if there's something you wanted to state before your staff member speaks, feel free to do that as well.
Mr. Rooks has been a social worker with the district for several years. He took on the role of autism coordinator, I believe, 3 years ago, and he's currently working on his doctorate in autism with the University of Kansas. And so we have an expert with us, and we are so lucky to have him as part of our team.
Thank you. We'll turn it over to Mr. Rooks to begin with the proclamation.
All right, this proclamation of Topeka Unified School District number 501, Autism Acceptance Month, April 2022. Whereas the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that 1 in 54 children in the United States are among the millions of Americans living with autism spectrum disorder. And whereas the month of April is recognized nationally as Autism Acceptance Month and includes observances to highlight the increasing number of individuals identified with ASD and the impacts of families and support services. And whereas Autism Acceptance Month is an opportunity to celebrate the unique perspective of those living with ASD. Whereas each person should have the opportunity to gain a quality education and follow their talents wherever they lead. And now, therefore, be it resolved, the Topeka Public Schools Unified District number 501, Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim April 2022 as Autism Acceptance Month.
Thank you. And thank you for all that you do for our students and for our staff. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Munoz. And I believe Mr. Rooks is wearing an autism. Is that the shirts that, there you go. And mine is in my office. So he's wearing his autism shirt. And if you would like an autism shirt, we are happy to get you one and get that to each of our board members to wear it at some point this month. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Munoz.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anderson. Mr. Rooks, tell us real quickly, if you could, just about yourself and the work that you do here at 501.
Yeah, so I am an autism coach within the district for the special education. And so my role is really to work with the teachers who support the students. I'm in classrooms all day, either supporting the students, maybe modeling strategies for teachers and just supporting those students. And then as well as, working with families to get connected to services in the community or just helping them understand programming at school that their child is receiving. And so I serve the district preschool through high school. And we have about 180 or so students with autism.
Well, thank you so much for all of your work. We really appreciate it. Any other questions? Let's see, Ms. Bowie.
Could you tell me a little bit about the doctorate degree that you're receiving? Is that something fairly new, and how long has that been available?
I'm actually getting a degree in educational psychology and research. And so, but my dissertation is on autism and transition services going into adulthood for individuals with autism. So I'll be finishing up here in the next few months.
Well, congratulations again. Thank you very much for being here with us and celebrating Autism Awareness Month.
Thank you.
That does complete our final proclamation. And again, Mr. Rooks, we are so very proud of you.
Okay, we'll recess for 5 minutes and we'll be right back. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started again. Next item on the agenda is public communication. Mr. Lister, do we have any interested individuals on? Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to the next item is business by consent. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move the board approve the items of business by consent as presented and authorize the board president or the superintendent to sign the special projects, purchasing contracts for and on behalf of the board.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, second to Ms. Schmidt. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move for a vote. Ms. Lister. Thank you so much. Next item on our agenda we have is a superintendent's report. Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda that we would like to talk about are state assessments. It is the celebration of learning time. We are excited. And that's what we call the state assessment time. And so we'll turn it over to Dr. Kipp, who's going to be presenting on state assessments. And as he prepares to present, as we pull up his PowerPoint, we want to remind board members that in addition to state assessments with the CAP, we have other assessments as well. So he's going to touch on that, talk a little bit about post-secondary effectiveness, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Kipp.
Good evening. Yes, we are excited. Several schools are really in the middle of state assessments or the celebration of learning. And we're excited to see these results that will probably be released towards the end of May. Mr. Gowan? Okay, so just to kind of get everybody up to speed, I know there's some new members in terms of state assessments and assessments in general. Why do we have to take these? The CAP is what we colloquially refer to as the Kansas Assessment Program, and the KELPA is what is basically the English proficiency exam that all EL students have to take. And so it helps inform us about students' learning and also fulfills the state accountability requirements. As Dr. Anderson mentioned, we also assess college readiness through ACT, PSAT, and we are also measured on post-secondary effectiveness. So even after our kids graduate, we are tracking them 2 years after they receive their diploma. So right now, kids are being tested on English language arts in grades 3 through 8 and in 10th grade. Same grade levels for math. Science only affects 3 grade levels, the 5th, 8th, and 11th grades. And KELPA, which we just finished, it ran from January to March. And that test for English proficiency is for all kindergarten through 12th grade students. The how really is, these are all computerized tests. They're not timed in any way, multiple choice. There's a lot of technology enhanced stuff. So kids that are taking them, at the elementary levels are getting exposed to kind of the technical pieces when they do come in the future to take future assessments. Next slide, please. In terms of how CAP is measured, it is split up into 4 levels. Essentially, you can think of level 1 as kind of a below grade level. Level 2 is on grade level work, but not necessarily college and career ready. And then levels 3 and 4 are essentially college and career ready, where level 4 is just an exemplary level. So our last assessment was in 2021, the CAP, and keep in mind in 2020, we did not have a state assessment due to the pandemic. And so I wanted to highlight some of the grade levels on English language arts. So you can kind of see, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I wanted to show kind of the distribution at each grade level of where those 4 levels that I mentioned before were at. Next slide. And similarly in mathematics, we can see each grade level and the corresponding percentages, I should have mentioned that, percentages of kids in those bands. Now, up until, like I mentioned, 2020, when the cap was canceled, we were on a really good trajectory. 2019, I listed out several schools that outperformed the state in certain grade levels in certain content areas. For example, McEachern, they outperformed the state in nearly every grade except ELA, 5th grade. So the list goes on down there, all the way to the middle schools. And on the right side, you can see some growth, and that's really growth from 2018 to 2019. There were 23 buildings out of 26 that experienced some growth in either mathematics or English language arts. And at the very bottom, I did think it was worth mentioning that the KELPA, our English language proficiency exam, we have met the state benchmark for every single year that it's been offered, all the way back to 2018. As I mentioned before, post-secondary success, that is one of the metrics that we are measured on, and it affects our accreditation. So, like I said, even after kids leave us, the state monitors whether the student receives a industry certification, whether they actually get like an associate's degree within 2 years, or persist in a 4-year college and remain enrolled. And that all that data comes from the National Clearinghouse. So what I wanted to do is just kind of illustrate, I pulled this together. We have our accreditation visit tomorrow, and I dove into the data of the 7 largest districts in the state of Kansas, which includes us. So looking at their post-secondary success over the last 5 years, every single large district in the state of Kansas has experienced a decline in post-secondary success, except one district, and that was us. We have increased our post-secondary success by nearly 4%. Now, is it exactly where we want it to be? No, but we are definitely growing in a direction that many other districts are not. And I had to mention that because I'm very proud of the fact that we're getting kids connected. You know, 4-year college isn't always the path for everyone, but industry certifications, we have many students going to get their CNA licenses, HVAC, you know, things that are needed in the labor market within our community. And so, and also persistence in 2-year and 4-year colleges. So how have we been doing this? We wanted to kind of summarize some key points on how we've made really successful post-secondary graduates and some of the next steps that we plan on doing. As we've mentioned before, we've had several FAFSA nights. We have many schools participate in the National Test Day in October, where they offer the PSAT, SAT, ACT, all in one day. ASVAB is for the military. Again, the industry certifications are something that we've expanded significantly through programs like TCALC and students attending Washburn Tech. The concurrent enrollment, that is something that is continuing to expand. We have more kids getting concurrent credits than we ever have in the past. And before they even leave us, the senior spreadsheet and data consults are one really systemic way that we monitor and track to make sure kids aren't falling through the cracks. I personally, I'm a veteran, and I'm exploring whether military service can start counting as a successful graduate. As it stands, the current formula does not count a military enlistment as a successful post-secondary graduate. And we generally do have about 8 to 10% of our kids end up graduates going into the military. And I think that's noble service, and it should be counted as a successful graduate. One thing that we plan to do in the future is also follow up with a survey, some sort of formal survey, either 9 months to a year, to just check in with our students and alumni and see how they're doing. Interestingly, we started looking at CAP scores for our successful graduates, and we found that 70% of the students that were successful ended up actually getting a level 1 or level 2 on their 10th grade assessment. So it's kind of interesting that I'm glad that the state assessments are not the only component that is looked at by the state in terms of predicting success. There's so many other layers and factors other than a 10th grade assessment. So with that, I will open it up to any questions you might have.
For the board members to know, just as Dr. Kipp just mentioned, the successful graduates, he means for people that are in college or completed college, when you look back at their CAP score for the post-secondary effectiveness rate, people who have effectively been considered a post-secondary effective student, and they're in their careers, but their CAP score wasn't necessarily one that is above a level 2. And so that's just an interesting piece why these other measures are quite important for us. We'll turn it over to Mr. Munoz to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Anderson. Are there questions about the data we just saw? Let's go first with Dr. Bonebrake and then Dr. Schumacher.
Yes, it's very interesting that of the 7 largest school districts, we've done very, very well. How about 5 years ago? How did we compare?
Well, actually, that data, sorry to cut you off, that data does reflect over a 5-year pattern. So 5 years ago, that growth, with post-secondary success, it's always done in the rears. So we're really looking at 2019 graduates, because we have to wait 2 years before we can determine whether they were successful or not. That particular data set looked back all the way back to 2017, and the growth all the way up, I'm sorry, not 2017, 2015 up to 2019, and that growth. But prior to that, we didn't dive into that kind of analysis that many years ago, Dr. Bonebrake.
Okay, so we can't tell if any specific activity allowed us to achieve this distinction, which I think it is.
Well, correlation.
How do you think we're different? How do you think we're different?
I think personally, talking to some of my peers that work in my position in other districts, we have such a focus at that granular student level. Rather than just blanket testing everyone on ACT, we differentiate. If my plans aren't a 4-year college, why do I necessarily need to take the ACT? Maybe the AccuPlacer or the ASFAB if I'm going into military service. So we almost differentiate those goals to the student's needs. And I think that has a correlation to our success.
Dr. Kipp, to Dr. Bonebrake's question, I guess the post-secondary effectiveness rate, has it increased over the years, and when did that increase start? I think when you talk about gains, so he's waving his hand, that's kind of what the question's getting at. Okay. So and when we try to compare, has there been a change, and when did those increases start?
Well, yeah, the one important metric that I did leave out that's weighted into that formula is our graduation rate. So as the graduation rate has climbed over the last 5-6 years, that is multiplied into our success rate. It's kind of a complex formula, but essentially the higher the graduation rate, the higher the persistence rate of college attending kids, the more industry certifications. All of those are additive in terms of increasing our success rate.
So Dr. Bonebrake, all of those things he just mentioned have increased. So we have our senior spreadsheet, which we started 6 years ago, where we track every senior and we meet with every high school and we talk about every senior. So they meet with every senior. They were already meeting with seniors, but now we document what's their plan. Do they have their FAFSA form done? What if they don't plan to go to college or the military? Let's have a career fair, which we're preparing to have our third one this year. And let's make sure we get them a job so that they leave and they go straight into a job or an industry credential. Ms. Wallace, with her continued creativity and help, we now offer more college credit classes than ever before in the Ed Equity Institute, which is new this year. We have students taking classes at Stanford, Arkansas State. Every class at TCALC is a college class. You get college credit for every class you take at TCALC. And so, all of those are expanded opportunities that have happened over the course of the 6 years, all of which adds to that post-secondary rate, if that answers the question, sir.
Dr. Schumacher.
Yeah, so this is maybe some personal experience, but with the 2021 CAP scores, do we take that with a grain of salt at all, considering that there was still a portion of our kids that were learning remotely and some of the restrictions around the assessment and when you can take it and where you have to take it?
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, we normally have over 95 to 98% participation on the state assessments. They did not cancel the 2021 CAP, but parents in the state of Kansas have the right to opt out. Now, spring of 2021 was still pretty significant in terms of pandemic and COVID positivity. So we actually had 72% of our students take the assessment. Now that's a significant drop. I spoke to many parents that were just are already on remote status and had no desire to come in to take an assessment, for their own personal choices, and we would respect those. So the state has not determined what they're going to do in terms of the accountability for that year. We tried our best to get everybody in that we could, but respecting parents' wishes and their rights to keep their kids safe. But definitely, I would have an asterisk next to the 2021 data. I think this year, the 2022 will be sort of a reset year. But yeah, longitudinal comparisons are going to be difficult because of the lack of 2020 data. And then, as you mentioned, Dr. Schumacher, the 2021 data across the state was low, not just us.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions? Ms. Bowley.
So at the legislators this last year, there was a lot of discussion of comparing the Kansas scores to the Missouri scores. Can you explain to us what's the difference? I know we have 4 levels. I think Missouri has 3. There seems to be a challenge with understanding our state assessment scores and rating our schools from those particular levels. Did that question make sense?
Absolutely. Dr. Kipp, would you like to start or?
Yeah, just from my own professional opinion, I think comparing 2 states that have completely different fundamental psychometrics of an assessment, the way it's constructed, and that's a dangerous precedent. Standards are different. Some states have adopted PARC and some of these national assessments that you can do state to state comparisons. But Missouri's model and Kansas model are so idiosyncratic to the state. I think that's purely apples and oranges in my professional opinion.
The other thing to remember when you're comparing assessments, some assessments, I came from the Missouri side, so I'm familiar with the MAP as opposed to the CAP, the Missouri Assessment Program. Some assessments, in addition to the levels being different, whether it's multiple choice, which Kansas has a multiple choice assessment in addition to the levels, or whether it's short answer, which has to be graded differently. That's also a difference between the two assessments. So the type of question, how it's asked, the levels, and what it's assessing. Those are all differences, certainly between Missouri and Kansas. On that same note, the post-secondary rate as well is very different. For example, in Missouri, you can count GD, you can count other things that you can't necessarily count in Kansas yet. So those are also differences to be mindful of when you're comparing states.
Does our state assessment like bump up as students answer questions, move into different stages?
Dr. Kipp?
Yes, it does have an adaptive nature to it. Without getting into it, yeah, it does adjust and adapt to those responses that the student is giving. So yeah. Mhm.
Dr. Kipp, I have a question for you. I know that our students are right now currently, some of them have already, or some of them are in the process of taking these tests. What are the processes we have in place to sort of take in that data and begin to sort of figure out where our attention needs to be focused?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's pretty much embargoed until the entire state is done collecting all the data. They don't really issue it out to certain districts just because we finish early or anything like that. We used to have to wait till well into the summer, but KFSD's done a great job of getting it to us right towards the end of May. And, it doesn't become technically official until the state board signs off on it, typically in the summertime, but at least we get the preliminary results. They don't change a whole lot. They might, upon review, I know they've already found a question on the 10th grade assessment that was somewhat suspect that they've told us that they're going to throw out. So things like that, and they're pilot testing some questions, but yeah, I love to get the data before teachers and principals and all that, all those folks, support staff leave, so that way they can kind of get some sort of feedback on, and they don't have to wait till summer is over to get some of that information. And, it helps in setting goals and improvement plans and things like that.
So the improvement plan discussion, Mr. Munoz, will be the last week of May with our principals. We will have a principals retreat, which we have every year. During that time, they'll take those assessment scores, and they have school improvement teams that'll contribute to that. And they will determine some of their goals for the next year, that last week of May. The first week in June, or the first board meeting in June, is when we will present to the board based on the scores that we have, and we'll reference them as preliminary. And if the first week in June, if that's a challenge for some reason, then by the second board meeting in June, you'll have that information.
Thank you both so much. Ms. Stewart Campbell.
Hi, Dr. Kipp. Thank you for this presentation. Very informative. 2 questions. One, how do parents find out how their children performed on CAP?
So glad you asked that question. Okay, I don't want to throw the board meeting off. That's the disclaimer. Oh, Mr. Gallen, there we go. There's our DJ, our tech DJ. All right, so can we go to the website? Because this is why I like to do this, because people really showing people step by step how you get to that space. And it also shows the authentic nature in which we're talking about scores. So we're really careful to try not to create forms and not to create spreadsheets with numbers on them. We just go to the state website and say, here's where it's at. If you want to look at your own school, here's where you go. So we're going to look at a school. And since we know McCarter has been watching, and we have a video that's out there about McCarter, and our Teacher of the Year finalist is from McCarter, we'll just pick McCarter. All right, so we can pick any school that we'd like to, but we're going to go to the main website. Yes, to the homepage. So if you're looking at the homepage, And in that home page, you're going to see some buttons down below, and one will be test scores. It used to, at our very front page, and there we go. And so you see COVID. Oh, I think you just passed those buttons. And I believe under the buttons, because we have on that page, and it's also on the assessment page. But I want to look to see, where did you just go? Okay, so on that, there was a button that says TPS assessments. You clicked on that. You'll see graduation rates and all of those items. In addition, we can go straight to looking at the KSDE website, which it's rather tiny, but I believe it may even be understanding your scores. You can also type in KSDE and assessments, but I believe request information on state assessments might be the link. And anything you need on assessments will be on this page. So the KSDE website should be on that page. I'm so glad we're on here. So if you click on assessments, the word assessments,
There it is, report card. Kansas report card.
so we went to the main web page, clicked on assessments, and then clicked on the word assessments, and there we have the report card. If you go to your own school, you'll see report card. Every school has a report card. Just go to your own school, click on report card, and you'll get there that way as well. But you might be a community member and you just are looking for schools and you want to know, I moved in the McCarter or Whitson or wherever, and we're going to click on a school. And board members, if there's some other school you want to look at, we can pull that up also.
I think, Mr. Gowan, you click state totals. You got to go back and type in McCarter, then hit search.
So a parent can see how their child's school performed, but how does a parent know about their individual child?
They contact the school, and Dr. Kip, certainly feel free to jump on in, but they contact the school and they can send them their page. They also on Tyler, many of those items are also embedded. All of their scores we can see on Tyler, so the school can actually send that to them directly. Dr. Kip, you want to add to that?
Yeah, there's a number of ways to get individual student scores. Like Dr. Anderson mentioned, easiest way is contacting the school. They can email it in a PDF or something to that degree. Even KU Center that manages all the tests has a historical site, like a parent portal. That's another way. Sometimes I just find most parents I talk to, it's just easier to contact your school and say, hey, I'd like my students' assessment scores. And we definitely, back in the old days, we used to mail them all out, but doing 9,000 of those got a little expensive. And so we're living in the digital age. We can definitely email them to any parent that wants.
Including the historical scores over time, they can get you that as well. Dr. Kip, can you go ahead and just repeat for those that are on the line while we're on this screen where you'd like for them to go to see the McCarter scores, sir?
Yes.
In this last few seconds. Thank you.
Yeah, this report card, you can look at everything about McCarter or any other school you want to look at, but it's under performance level reports. There's a little icon there. And then that you can toggle different years, you can toggle different subjects, math, grade, if you want to just look at fourth grade, things like that. You can even toggle pre-reduced lunch, ELL kiddos, and then it'll show you graphically how your building is doing compared to the district and compared to the state. So really great wealth of information.
So Dr. Kip, so we're on the fourth grade. So then for the parents that are reading these different bands, can you just sum up how, where are they when from 2019 to where we are now compared to the district, if they're reading this report as they're watching this on the screen?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what grade level this is, but basically the
fourth grade?
Was it fourth grade math or fourth grade math? Okay, so the fourth grade math kiddos at McCarter last spring, about 24% were in level 1. And that's recognized by orange, very top And then the yellow is level 2 at about 58%. Level 3 is about 16%, and level 4 doesn't show you the number, but if you scroll down, you can actually see the raw numbers or hover over it.
And then if they wanted to go back in years, would they just go on the side and click the years, Dr. Kip?
Yes, ma'am. Yep. There's just a drop down on the year, and it, I think, goes back 5 years. Or if you wanted to see a historic altogether, 5 years of data.
So if you're trying to look at any building, building-wide, if you want to look at race, if you want to look at free lunch, if you want to look at our Native American students, that's the power in your own hand. You don't need to ask someone to interpret it. You can literally go to our website. This link that you just clicked on, what did you just click on here?
This was the 5-year.
Okay, so if you go down to that 5-year report, thank you. Mr. Gowan was just pointing out the trend that you could see if you wanted to look at a school. So if you're a parent thinking about what school do you want to go to, or what does the school in your area, how do they perform? We encourage you not only just the test scores, but you saw the dropout rate, the attendance rate, and all the other data about that school that's available to you. Thank you, Dr. Kip, for walking our families through that. And thank you for that question, Ms. Stewart Campbell. There are no other questions. We do have 2 other items to talk about, but are there any other questions, Mr. Munoz?
Any other questions? Okay, I think that's all for today, for right now.
Thank you. The next item, Mrs. Wallace, will just be collecting over the next few minutes, just information that you'd like to give us in terms of things that you'd like for us to focus on as we prepare to submit a report for ESSER funding. Ms. Wallace, as we pull up that PowerPoint, it's just going to remind us what ESSER funding is. We have ESSER funding 1 and 2, but as we prepare for ESSER funding 3, we must get feedback from stakeholders, then prepare our request based on that feedback. And we'd love to hear the board's feedback. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Wallace.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson, and good evening, board. So there are some very specific ways in which we can spend these dollars. They've outlined, there's actually 16 criteria or guidelines for allowable expenditures of the grant.
And as it says on the very first page, these funds have to be spent by September 2024. So at this point, we're just collecting feedback since we still have ESSER 1 and 2, so that before we ever go into ESSER 3, we have this report ready. I'll turn it back over to Ms. Wallace.
I would also share that 20% of the allocation is required to be spent on learning loss. And that's around, I believe, go back one. Okay, so of those 15 areas, on the next slide, there are the first 5 of the 16. So we thought we would chunk them and kind of talk about those allowable uses. So the first one is any activity that is allowable with current federal dollars through the Elementary Secondary Education Act, IDEA or special education federal dollars, the Carl Perkins federal dollars, and the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act. So any dollars that you could spend in any of those programs, you could also be allowable uses for the ESSER 2. Coordination of any COVID preparedness and response efforts. Providing principals and other school leaders with resources to address individual school needs, activities to address the unique needs of low-income children, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and foster care youth, including outreach and delivery services, and then procedures and systems to improve LEA preparedness and response efforts. So within those 5 areas, we're just going to chunk it up and talk about those 5 areas. Are there suggestions or ideas in which you would like to see some of those dollars used?
And board members, if you don't have a particular idea, like I want funds to be used here or there, if it's just, I really want us to do something with, for example, English language learners or homelessness, or I really want us to spend more time thinking of and getting feedback from the rest of our stakeholders, as we have many groups we'll be meeting with. We'd love to hear that. So anything outside of compensation, are there areas that you want us to pay special attention to as we leave these 5 topics up that you'd like for us to look at? We have 3 more slides, because remember there are 15 categories, but the first 5 areas, we'll turn it over to the board. Mr. Munoz?
Yes, Mr. Tatum.
All of the categories, all the items that are listed in item number 4, I think are, those are some of the more powerful and salient issues that impact the community. I would say anything that we can do with any of the issues involving number 4 would be spot on. Also, just as a point of clarification, number 5, LEA, is that law enforcement agency?
No, that's your local education agency. That's Topeka Public Schools.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And Ms. Boley always reminds us not to use acronyms, and we have a few in here, so we'll be sure to say what IDA, SEA, we'll be sure to mention what all the acronyms are moving forward.
Dr. Bonebrake.
Well, I haven't seen the other 10, but I would suspect that if it costs the school district $1 million a day to be open, to teach, to learn, to provide meals, to pay teachers, yeah, I would propose we extend the school year 20 days this year and next year.
Well, ESSER 3 can't be used this year, correct? Because we still have to do the plan and submit it.
Correct. We have to apply and propose our ideas for approval before they can be expended.
But for next year and moving forward, we do have ESSER 1 and 2, however. So to your point, extending the school year and the 20-day number is what you're hoping that we give some consideration to.
Correct.
Yes, Ms. Bowie.
I'm wondering under number 4, I know that during the years we were in remote, or the year that we were in remote, we lost some students that dropped out of school, we couldn't find again. I know the state talks about lots of students that have been lost. Would any of that money be able to be spent there on number 3 or number 4 to try to locate those students and find out how we can assist them in finishing up their education?
Yes, I mean, that would be COVID related. Absolutely.
I would like to see something like that, that we can find out how we can assist them, since life occurrences kind of derailed them.
Thank you. And I want to point out Ms. Kramer on Ms. Wallace's team is in the audience taking notes. So if you don't see us writing, we do have a staff member here taking down all of the comments. And we'll be bringing this plan back to you to say, because you said this, here are some things that you and the many other stakeholders have shared to target some of these areas. Other thoughts before we go to the next slide?
Ms. Schmidt.
I'm curious, you said that there was a certain amount that we had to use for learning loss. Can we go above and beyond that amount, or are we restricted to that?
Yes, we can go above that, but that's the minimum expectation.
Okay, because I've read a lot of articles about the learning loss that our students have experienced because of COVID and remote learning. So I think maybe going above and beyond that, if there's a need, would be something we should do.
Mr. Campbell.
Thinking of English learners and racial ethnic minorities, if we could help students who, okay, just yesterday, I got a phone call from a new American from Central America originally, who wants his high school diploma. He works full-time and he cannot go to traditional brick and mortar. He's not familiar with how to use the computer. So I know we're doing wonderful things at Avondale Academy, but for students like him, who it would be a big challenge to complete his high school diploma, with his lack of computer literacy. But the fact that he got my name and number from a pastor here in town, and he's only 17, like that's how badly he wants his high school diploma, that he took the initiative to call me. And in the migrant program, here's where I'm going with this. In the migrant program, we have good old books, like pen and paper books available in English and Spanish for credit recovery. And that's what we use to get these kids their high school diploma. So I'm wondering if we could do something like that with some of these ESSER funds, because this boy won't qualify for the migrant program because he hasn't worked in agriculture. So I'm like, I was just thinking of how to help him.
So what I'm hearing you say is having greater resources for young people who don't qualify for programs such as the migrant program, be it textual materials or other resources, but identifying people who would not otherwise qualify.
Right, like the PASS program is wonderful. If we could use some of this funding to adopt it's called PASS, Portable Assistance Study Sequence, and it's just books and pen and paper tests.
Thank you.
If we could adopt that to help students like this man I just described. That's my idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is, I'm really interested to see what our assessments say. Of course, we won't know that for a while, but once we have that data in, that lets us know where our students are, looking at it with the lens of equity and who are the students who need it most. We know there's a lot of need in our student population, but those for whom it would make is what I would most be looking at and want to see. So.
Okay, so the next 5 categories are training and professional development for Topeka Public Schools staff on the sanitation and minimizing of the spread of infectious disease. 7, purchasing supplies to sanitize and clean. 8, planning for and coordinating during long-term closure, including how to provide meals, technology for online learning, guidance for carrying out IDEA or special education requirements, and providing professional services consistent with those requirements. 9, purchasing educational technology, including hardware, software, and connectivity for the TPS students, and providing mental health services and supports.
Open this up, Mr. Munoz.
Yep. Yes, Dr. Schumacher.
I think with this one, there's kind of 2 that being on the technology committee now, technology is not infinite. And so there's always going to be turnover on the things that we use, including software and hardware. And if able, I don't know if we've used ESSER once, if we can use it again on technology, but and then number 10, the mental health services. We spoke about this a little bit last time, but I think even more so now in my day-to-day, mental health, even more so than 18 months ago, is becoming a bigger problem in our community. And I think continuing to try to support that is very important.
Others on input? Ms. Bowley?
I would definitely piggyback on the number 10. I believe we're just seeing just the very tip of that iceberg. So I think being prepared for that mental health, possibly crisis, we just don't know, but to be prepared there, be forward thinking in our spending on that.
Any others with input? Yeah, I would, yes, Dr. Bonebrake.
Well, we have social workers at the schools. I think if we extended the school year, we'd have them more available.
All right. Yes, I would echo the mental health. When you look at some of the data we saw, you saw an uptick in 5th, 6th grade, and you sort of see a dip. And maybe it's just I'm alert to that because I have somebody who's a daughter who's in 6th grade, and it's a difficult transition going from elementary to middle school. And to point of Dr. Schumacher that these young kids are not living in the same world that we lived in. And so we have a hard time understanding the difficulties they're going through. So mental health, I think, is something pretty important.
So as we go to that next slide, just to recapture, Mr. Schumacher, you asked a question regarding if we spent money in ESSER 1 or 2, could we spend it in ESSER 3? The answer is yes to that. So we'll look at technology and all the forms of connectivity and other matters. Dr. Bonebrake, as you mentioned the additional time, and it's helpful that you actually said that, because it's not just extending the school year for academics, but you're suggesting, it sounds like, that from mental health, that we extend mental health services beyond the normal school year in some fashion as well, in addition to the academic component. So that is a helpful point to take note of, as well as meals and other services. Thank you. So noted. Thank you. All right, the final slide, Ms. Wallace.
Yes, so 11 through 16. Planning and implementing summer learning and enrichment programs and after-school programs. 12, addressing learning loss among students, including vulnerable populations. School facility repairs and improvement to enable operation of school, to reduce risk factors of virus transmission and exposure to environmental health hazards, and to support student health needs. 14, inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, and upgrade projects to improve indoor air quality in our school facilities. Developing strategies and implementing public health protocols for the reopening and operation of school facilities. And 16, other activities necessary to maintain TPS operations and services and employ existing staff.
Okay, feedback on this. Dr. Schumacher and then Ms. Bowie.
I'll just say we discussed it with the first 5 as well, but with learning loss. And I think, the data as it was coming in 2020 and 2021, it seems like the populations that suffered the biggest learning loss were those that were in the bullet 4 that Mr. Tatum had pointed out. And so I think a lot of these, there's some overlap, and I would agree that supporting those students that needed the most in an equitable manner makes sense.
Ms. Bowie.
I'm looking at number 15. Over the last 2.5 years, as we were learning about this pandemic, this virus, there was so much misinformation that came out as we were trying to figure out how to protect ourselves. I'm wondering if we can have some type of information to families and to students of what we actually know here at the end of the pandemic that protects us and keeps us safe when we're not in school, when we are in school. I think people are just really confused about the information after all these years of so many things coming out, that we just educate them about how to keep safe, like what to do when you're at a large birthday party and those type of things. I don't think everybody is totally trusting or understanding of how to protect ourselves.
Thank you, Ms. Boley. So on the last slide, it was 8 and 10. I think the first slide was 4 and perhaps 2, and we're kind of circling some of these numbers. On this final slide, as we go to that final slide, the learning loss 12 seems to be the high priority, in addition to the area of education around, as a general statement, because really 13 through 15 address that, but as a general statement, education around reducing the transmission and remaining healthy, kind of as that public health piece in number 15. So we've taken notes in that, and as well as some of the specific comments. Ms. Wallace does want to share what we are currently doing with learning loss. Remember, we have ESSER 1 and 2, and then we will take in your feedback. We do want you to know that Ms. Wallace will be meeting with my at the last meeting for my student advisory. I have a student group at each one of the high schools that I meet with. So she will come to that, and she'll have the floor for a few minutes on our last meeting to get their feedback as well. And they'll have a thought exchange survey, as will parents and the DCAC, and a few other, well, more than a few, but a number of other stakeholder groups, including our clergy group as well. And so we'll look forward to getting that information back to you. So you hear about what we learned about. Ms. Wallace, what are we doing right now with learning loss?
Okay, so this year, every school has an after-school program to support learning loss and help with current academic struggles. And all of their programs also include some enrichment, because we know kids lost out on some of those opportunities last year too. So they're balancing that after school program with some academic and some enrichment. And then this summer, much like we did last summer, we will be offering enrichment camps. Those enrichment camps, after we opened them up the first week, we had over 205 students sign up for enrichment camps at TCALC and Topeka High. And then we're running a 4-week extended school year for learning loss at 4 different sites, targeting students and inviting them based on scores and concerns around their learning loss. And so about 120 to 150 students per grade level will be invited to participate in that 4-week program. And that program will offer lunch and transportation, while the camps offers breakfast and lunch, but not transportation.
So with that, our final set of feedback.
I think there's a question. Do you have a question? Yeah, Ms. Bowie.
I was wondering if we could also offer, we learned a lot during remote. If we could offer maybe some tutoring that is remote, that parents and students can choose any time of the day to actually to work out with an individual teacher one-on-one.
Thank you for that idea. We do have some remote opportunities this summer, but they looked a little bit different, but I like your idea.
That program you just discussed, Ms. Wells, I think it's really important to focusing on those who we know need that extra support. Not only that, but thinking through and that transportation obviously may be a difficult hurdle for them to overcome. So having all of that as part of the program, I think, is exactly what I was wanting to hear.
And then this last slide shares all of the different stakeholder groups that we need to gather input from to be able to access our ESSER $3. And then,
I was going to say you might want to mention who some of them are, because they're beyond schools.
Okay. So yeah, students, families, teachers. We also have our Native American tribes,
civil rights organizations, and then stakeholders that represent groups with disabilities. And then we will also just have a link for the public. If you just know someone that doesn't have a child in school, but they're interested in the school and where they live, or just the schools in Topeka, they can just submit ideas that they'd like to see as an area of focus in terms of how they'd like to see us investing dollars to improve public education. That link will be live on Monday as we continue to put this PowerPoint that you now have out there for people to learn about ESSER and to continue to give us feedback.
And I would be remiss if I did not share that Ms. Stacy Kramer is our grant manager. And so she's really been managing these millions of dollars and doing just an amazing job.
That does conclude our report on ESSER. Thank you so much for the feedback in that regard. I'm going to turn it over to our school board attorney, who will be sharing the next 2 items that the school board president and vice president have given in regards to the Board of Ethics. I'll turn it over to Ms. Whiteman. And Ms. Whiteman, I think with this vendor, which I do want to share for those that are watching, we have a group SOH. We saw another board in another state with a great video, and we asked them who did their video, and that person flew out tonight. So you actually don't have to stand at the podium. You're welcome to stand at the podium, but they, I believe, are videoing in a way and testing it out that if you stay at your seat, they should be able to capture you, and we should be able to hear you just fine. Am I correct with that, Mr. Gowan? The podium's just decoration for the room. And if someone were to come to give a public speech. It's for them, such as our student of the month today. In his brief speech, it's really meant for them. I had to sit down too after I realized this was where I was supposed to be. I turn it over to you, Ms. Whiteman.
Good evening. I think last time when you were discussing the ethics list that you have and has been presented to you, we talked about number 6, referring all complaints to the superintendent or board president who will respond. As elected officials, you get calls and emails from many people in the public and in your representative districts. And once you get those, you certainly can, when they call, try to get as many facts as you can, take notes. But once you do that, just simply say that we have 2 board policies that require us to have all complaints addressed at the lowest possible level. And those 2 complaints are the policies. One is directly a board policy that basically states that when board members receive complaints, they will direct them to either the board president or the superintendent for resolution. And then there is a policy under personnel, under the federal laws relating to discrimination, no retaliation based on sex, race, disability, national origin, or age. So again, if you get a complaint of any nature, do feel free to take notes, get the facts, and then simply say, we have policies and procedures that require that it be looked into, investigated, but by referring it to the board president and the superintendent, they can make sure that we follow the processes that are required by law to deal with any complaint. And the district wants to address any and all parent and staff complaints. However, it has to be done according to the policy and according to law. And part of the policy basically says we have to make sure that we investigate, get both sides, interview, and make sure that it is a complaint and what the facts are, and then make attempts to resolve that. So the district is very interested in preventing issues, working with parents and employees, but it's important that we have good communication between the board members and the superintendent to make sure that Dr. Anderson can assign someone to look into the complaint, make sure what the facts are, report those facts back, and then hopefully resolve it if there is any basis for the complaint. Beyond that, we have to be careful. We all are in public service, or you all ran for an elected position because you want to help others. So making sure that part of the helping is in the community. You're in the community, people will come to you and talk to you where they may not come to the central office or go to the principal. So as you are really the eyes and ears of the district in the community. So we encourage you to express any concerns you hear about to the superintendent and the board president, so that we can stay on top of any concerns, so that we make sure that we're delivering the best quality education that we can with the dollars that you make available. The number 7 is basically, and I like the approach of this list because it's always in the positive. Do uphold and enforce all laws of the state of Kansas, board rules and regulations, court orders, and local board policy. when you ran for your position as board, you took an oath of office. That oath of office is that you swore to uphold all the Constitution of the United States, state of Kansas, and all the laws. I often have to remind board members that even the ones you don't agree with, you have to uphold. And at times it can be difficult when you look at the many, many state and federal laws that control education. I have had on occasion myself looked at them and said, what did they do? But again, once they get passed, they have the laws, of course, that have the force and effect of law. And it's always important that we are on the side of upholding the law as written until we're able to get it changed through the legislative process. When I started practicing law in Hutchinson, Kansas, in the district court, they had this about 15-foot wood drawing, or was really a wood carving of the Lady of Justice, and basically it's the lady with the scales in her hands, and basically the idea is the process of law is that the balance of justice weighs equally, but once it's a law, we all have to obey it, whether we agree with it or not, until it's changed by the legislature or the federal court. The same applies to your board policy. Anytime the board adopts a policy, and there is a policy manual, you have a policy committee that reviews the policies and makes recommendations. Once the legislature finally leaves town after the 25th, and the governor signs laws, or if she has the option of any law passed by the legislature has to be signed within 10 days. If she doesn't act on it within the 10 days, it becomes the law without her signature. So at the beginning of May, the policy committee will be looking at and examining all the new education legislation, reviewing recommended policies for the board to adopt. And once those are adopted, the policy has the force and effect of law also. So we're always looking at what does federal law require, what does the state law require, but what more importantly, does your board policy require? And if ever in doubt, the first thing we ask is, as your new attorney, I'm going to your board policy daily as I get asked questions, because I can't answer it completely until I've reviewed what your policy says. I have a fairly good handle on the 900 or so state laws affecting education, but it all starts with, first of all, what does your policy require of you as a board and of us as employees of the school district? So that certainly is always available. I want you to always feel comfortable. If you have a question about what is the right thing to do, or what is the legal thing to do, you always feel free to reach out to the superintendent or me, and we will get the information, review it, and get it to you as quickly as possible. That is always a very legitimate question. What does the law require? What does our policy require? According to your policy, you have given the superintendent the authority and the staff, once you adopt a policy, to implement that policy, the details through regulations. But even as those are developed, your policy requires that they be brought to the board so that you get to look at what is the procedures for implementing the policy that you as a board have adopted. The most important thing is in upholding the laws of the state of Kansas. There are some requests of individual board members if they're for individual special favor, or if it's in violation of the policy. Certainly, you can certainly ask, but if it's against the law or policy, my job is to tell you that you can't do that. So Uh, There are times, sometimes when in my former job that board members would want to come in and see people's individual personnel evaluations. The statute is very clear. Only a limited number of people can see employee evaluations. That includes the employee, their supervisor, the superintendent, and the board attorney. And you can see those, but it has to be an executive session to protect the confidentiality. All of our employees have privacy rights, and all of our students and their parents have privacy rights. So the district takes a lot of effort to make sure that we are safeguarding the privacy rights of everyone as it's required by both federal and state law. And the state law, when it comes to students, is even more restrictive on student records than the federal law. So we're always mindful that we're being very cautious when it comes to confidential information about students or employees. All of that will be, if need, will be shared in executive session, but that has to be kept confidential and not taken outside of executive session. I think that the other question, that's 6 and 7, maybe I should stop and ask if you have any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Whiteman? Yeah.
Okay. Number 8, and I'll stop at that. That is, we, as elected officials, you have to make decisions in terms of the welfare of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. And your discussion on the use of the ESSER III funds indicated that the focus is on students and all students, and every decision has to be made based upon what is best for all students. In the law, we call that, as elected officials, you have a fiduciary duty. And I always like to use the term fiduciary because it sounds like a banking term or commercial term, because your banks have a fiduciary duty. Any time you invest money, that individual has a fiduciary duty. It means it's a position of trust, and people have confidence in you to make the decisions that's best for their children and employees as an employer. So the fiduciary duties have evolved through case law litigation, where elected officials were sued, or people in commerce were sued for not exercising that trust and confidence when you have in your hands the ability to make decisions about individuals' futures. So when they talk about fiduciary duties as elected official, number 1 is the obedience. You probably never thought that you would have to or be in a position where you had to be obedient. But when it talks about your fiduciary duty of obedience in the law, it means that you obey the laws, you obey the Constitution, you obey board policy. So that is the obedience part of it. There is also a fiduciary duty to monitor finances, which as a board, you are responsible if you ever have a question about any expenditure that you get in all of the reports that you receive on the agenda. If someone calls you about a question about an expenditure, please just pass that along, but make sure you make the question or your individual question known so that it can get answered. By doing so, you are exercising the fiduciary duty of monitoring finances. And as a board, ultimately, you're responsible, you trust that to the superintendent and the employees, but ultimately every dollar that's spent by the district, the board is basically involved in and responsible for that. That's why last board meeting you had an audit presentation, discussion about the audit, School district funds by law have to be audited on a yearly basis, and any questions about finances is always there. And then there's also the fiduciary duty of loyalty, which means according to your policy, the board doesn't act unless 4 of you affirmatively vote for it. And then once 4 members vote for any item, it basically in the law is the board has spoken. And even if you didn't vote for the proposition, the board still has spoken. So it's always important to understand, we call it the rule of 4. And that's not to say that it might not come up at some future time and you may vote on it again and change your vote. But once the board has voted and there are at least 4 affirmative votes, then the board has spoken. Generally, the board speaks through legal action at an open board meeting. But when you're not in a board meeting, the superintendent or the board president, vice president, generally it's the president will speak for the board. And if the president's not available, the vice president would speak for the board on any issue on that matter. The don't in that is that we cannot base votes and decisions on special interest agendas or on what's best for your own child. As a board member, one of the most difficult times you will have is if there is an issue with your child at a building level, or if you have a concern about your child. Make sure that how you handle that, the public will watch and make sure that you have all the rights of a parent in the education system, but you have no more rights than any other parent. So it's always important that it be a fair decision-making process. And I know this will never happen to you, but I have been involved in situations where a board member's child was disciplined, short-term suspended, or even expelled. And I'm sure that will never happen to your child. But if it does, my advice for you as your attorney would be that you do not get involved in the decision. This will be a time where if you have a spouse, you will let them go to the meeting and represent the family. Because people will always see you as an elected official, not as a parent. And it's very hard in those situations, but hopefully it won't happen to any of you as elected officials during your term of office. With that, any questions?
Ms. Bowley.
I had one for Mrs. Schmidt. I believe you copied the board policies off. Do you remember how many pages you had to copy?
When I printed those out, it was a 4 to 5 inch 3-ring notebook.
Right. So. And Miss Lister, I think, copied them also, so she might know that too. Several hundreds of pages. My goal is always to make the board policy book smaller and shorter and use as few words as possible when they're in writing. So that will be our goal to try to reduce the numbers. But I do have, in full disclosure, tell you that as I've looked at the bills that have already passed before the legislators left on the 25th, many of the education bills are going to require new board policies that we will be presenting to you for approval. So in order to add those, we're going to have to look at taking some of the others out. But one of my goals would be to go through the policy book, the board district policy book, and see how we can tighten some of those policies and have the same impact, but maybe with fewer words.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much for being here. We're lucky to have you and your wealth of knowledge and experience that you bring. So we're thankful for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
That concludes our presentation this evening, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Next item on our agenda are action items, and it is, let's take a look here. Approval of the 2021, what says 20, our boarding meeting schedule, the next 2022, 2023 Board of Education meeting schedules. It's an action item. Is there a motion on this action item?
I move we approve the drafted schedule.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the action item. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? Okay, we move on to a vote. Ms. Lister. That was Mr. Tatum. Okay, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is, let's take a look. It looks like a discussion item of ESSER funding. Is there anything else to, no, it looks like we've covered that. So moving on to board comments, Mr. Bonebrake, Dr. Bonebrake.
Okay, not like the slap heard around the world at the Oscars. I'm sure that Chris Rock has recovered, but unfortunately, the legislature is inflicting a pain upon all Kansans, which has the potential to be enduring, inescapable, and painful. There's a $3 billion surplus in the budget. Healthcare workers were announced bonuses recently. Teachers got nothing except the threat to kill public education. The legislatures are off for 3 weeks starting March 25th. 3 weeks, ostensibly, to hear from their constituents. Well, we have a lobbyist, Jennifer Crow, and she's been talking to these Senate and the representatives, K through 12 subcommittees. And I wonder if she could concoct some talking points that we could then modify in our own way and present them so that the legislators can hear from at least a few constituents. Because I'm not sure how many actually take advantage of that opportunity. There's vouchers, there's the parental rights, there's, somebody told me there's 20 proposed laws to affect the education system, none of which have anything to do with easing the workload of the teachers for no extra pay. They get to work much harder. And, you know, the vouchers are really just a subtle way to eliminate the school system. So I would like our lobbyists to present to us some talking points and give us a list, some contacts of our representatives here so that we can contact them and tell them our approval or disapproval. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. Dr. Schumacher.
Thank you. I just want to start out, and we might touch on this again, but I think this has been since our last meeting. Our Kansas Teacher of the Year finalist from McCarter Elementary, Miss Munoz, and then semifinalists from Robinson, Miss Atkins. Definitely a shout out and congratulations to them. Also, I'm thinking of the teachers and the staff and the administrators that are starting with assessments. I know that coming from a house with an educator and with kids that are going through assessments currently, that's never an easy time. There maybe is a little more stress in the air. And so I'm thinking of all them. Last weekend, I was able to participate in our Roll and Read event through Parents as Teachers, celebrating the Week of the Young Child. I thoroughly enjoyed that, especially since I was a celebrity reader. And anytime I can stroke my ego, I'm a happy man. So, and then finally last week, we met in Technology Committee and we just discussed it a little bit at the last board meeting. We discussed cybersecurity in more detail and how that becomes a bigger and bigger issue, potentially a more expensive issue, and how it is important for us as board members to support some of the things that we put in place to try to keep our staff and our students and our data safe from a ever-present threat that maybe gets a little bit easier and easier. And it's a very complicated thing because the bad guys get smarter and it gets harder to tell what's real and what's not. And so the more that we can help the staff remain safe, I think is good.
Thank you. Mr. Tatum.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got a couple of comments and a question. Last week, I believe it was, my wife and I had the opportunity to go to see unicycle riders at McEachern, where my youngest daughter goes to school. And she really surprised me by expressing some interest in wanting to ride a unicycle. Well, she's learning. It's a work in progress. She's kind of frustrated with herself because she doesn't quite have it down yet. But there were lots of kids that did, and they all did a phenomenal job. I mean, I don't think I ever had a thought that, I think I want to learn how to ride a unicycle. So, and I'm guessing not many people do, but for those that can do it well, they are absolutely spot on. And Principal Vic Williams he is the instructor, coach, trainer, facilitator, and he does a phenomenal job of helping them to learn how to do it well. And so I asked him at the end of this program, I said, Vic, would you be willing to have your group come out to a board meeting and do something for us here? Probably not in here, but maybe in the parking lot. And he said, I would certainly be willing to entertain something like that. So I'm just putting it out there for the board to think about if we want to invite something like that. I'm not sure the logistics behind that, but that would be wonderful. These kids do a phenomenal job. A lot of them do such a fabulous job of learning how to unicycle that he keeps them on board as mentors for others that are coming up. And it's a wonderful program. So kudos to Principal Williams and the hardworking students at McEachern Elementary. Second comment.
Mr. Tatum, if I could just mention to Mr. Munoz, when you finish, if you may want to talk about this item, past boards many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, periodically had board meetings at other schools in the community. And so perhaps rather than asking people to come to us, perhaps we should come to them.
That's a great
and
suggestion.
Maybe that school is one that might be having something that evening anyway, and that may be a simpler piece. Something you may want to talk about when you go through, and we picked 1 or 2 times in the year where we rotated in that fashion.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. That's a fantastic suggestion. And Dr. Anderson, that leads to my next comment. I would love to have an autism t-shirt. As someone who spent many, many years advocating for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, I am absolutely a very strong supporter of our autism community. My youngest daughter is on the autism spectrum. So I know there are a lot of dedicated, hardworking professionals here at Topeka Public Schools that are doing some great work with our students that have autism. I know because I know several of them that work with my daughter. So, and then my question, Mr. President, we got some information here on the board retreat. Were we going to do anything with that? Just trying to keep it on the radar, especially since I know some of these dates are coming up soon.
Yeah, I just got the information just like you, collected their singular care. I believe, and let me know if I'm not mistaken, Saturday, May 21st seems to, by just a little bit, have more support from most. So unless there's something that doesn't work for anyone here, we've marked on your calendar, Saturday, May 21st for our board retreat. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, next, Ms. Schmidt.
So during our brief little intermission there, where we took a picture with our Highland Park High School Senior of the Month, Morgan Dean, I spoke briefly with his parents and just mentioned, how proud they must be of their son and all that he's accomplished and that they have accomplished through him. Because parenting's kind of feels like a thankless job sometimes, so being able to highlight those opportunities like they had tonight and really celebrate those. And so I asked him, I said, what's your special sauce? What are you doing that has created such an outstanding young man? And he said, family. And it really got me thinking, those who have supportive, loving families, sometimes we take that for granted, right? Those that don't, it's either a hurdle they have to overcome, or maybe they create a different kind of family. But it made me think of this quote. I had to go find it. And it says, families are the compass that guide us. They are the inspiration to reach great heights and our comfort when we occasionally falter. So then I got to thinking kind of how that relates to us. We don't want our families to feel like they have to operate in a silo, right? As educators, as the board, as teachers, administrators, we all partner with our students and their families in order that they can succeed. A family by extension, if we may. So it was just really fun to talk to them. So.
Thank you so much. Ms. Stewart Campbell.
So at Equity Council last week, we heard from 3 of our Topeka Public School African-American educators about how they overcame barriers to academic success. And one of them, who's a first-year teacher, he specifically mentioned that about the first time he saw a man who looked like him wearing a suit and tie, and how that changed his whole trajectory. And that man is sitting in this room. That was our very own Mr. Larry Robbins, when he was, I think, a mentor at the time at the school, and at this first-year teacher's middle school. And he talked about how that stuck with him. And he thought, the expression, you don't know you can be it if you don't see it. So this first-year teacher saw it in Mr. Robbins, and now he's one of our very own educators. So that was really cool. So I wanted to mention that. And yeah, yes. Yeah, and then also Dr. Gray, he shared some stories, and then also Mr. Gardner was the third. But just to keep my comments brief, I'm just going to talk about the first year teacher and Mr. Robbins. And this past weekend, I had the honor of attending the National School Board Association Conference with Ms. Bully and Dr. Anderson, and also the two administrators who wrote the application, who presented the data on our barrier-breaking, award-winning dual language, pre-K dual language program. So that was really exciting. So another big shout out to Dr. Kipp and Dr. Mejia, and I know we'll be hearing from them later about this. In addition to attending that Magna Award ceremony, I also was able to attend some other really inspiring sessions that I really look forward to sharing with my my board mates, with the rest of the board at a later date. So this is some really good stuff. And finally, Ms. Bully and I also attended the event celebrating the election of the National School Board Association's new president. What does that have to do with us? Well, Mr. Frank Henderson has served on the Seaman School District, the Seaman School Board for, I don't know how many years, a long time, 14 years. Yes, so that was a big deal. There was this very like gala event, and there was a band playing, and Miss Bully and I were like, Topeka, yeah. So this is just exciting because, okay, and not only is Mr. Henderson the president of the National School Board Association, but if those who don't know, the new executive director of the National School Board Association is also from Kansas, Dr. Joe Heim. He was the director of the Kansas Association of School Boards. So all this to say, Kansas is very well represented at the national level, and Kansas leadership is guiding school boards all across the country. So yay, yay, Kansas. Yeah, at Astra. And that's all. Thank you.
Ms. Bowley.
Hey, hey, hey. Lift it up for everybody to touch. Our Magna Award. Now I'll try to get a little bit more professional. Excuse me. So as I was going through the board docs, I was just looking, every time I look at our personnel report, I just see so many people who support our district. I look at our leadership teams in every building, our CNA teams, and our curriculum teams, and all the people who volunteer to be on so many committees. And, you know, we don't celebrate them enough for everything they do to support everything that we would like to happen for our students. I also wanted to say I was really glad to see that we are extending our contract with the Kansas Children's Service League to help our students. The trip was amazing, and we will report back on the sessions that we had, so our board members understand what we attended and what maybe will move us forward. We, Ms. Stewart Campbell and I attended the policy committee and had our first meeting with our new attorney. And so we looked over a few policies and tried to make plans of what we want to do next. I just wanted to thank everybody for allowing us to go on the trip. It was so informative. And hey, I'm done.
Thank you. Couple of quick announcements here, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Finance Council, we are going to be doing a review of our checks and balances. We talked about it, but I want to make sure we get there. Getting back to Ms. Whiteman's point of fiduciary responsibilities and the trust that we have and the responsibility to make sure that the funds are are spent in a way that is on board and the way they should be. So out of that council, that's what we'll be doing. Let's take a look here. Congratulations to Mr. Dean from Highland Park. Sounds like he's doing great things, is going to, and will do even better, bigger things in the future. There was also a story locally about Mr. Trey Richardson from, again, Highland Park High School, who has a number of doors available to him. He's still a junior, so he'll have a year to decide. But Highland Park High School is doing amazing things there with the staff and their students. Recognition again to our assistant principals who, just like our principals in every school, are working to support teachers and staff and of course our students. So again, it's very important and poignant to recognize the work that assistant principals do. And we had recently a list of an amazing group of 2022 Distinguished Staff Award winners, including our very own Dr. Gray. I think I always look forward to seeing that list to see individuals who are doing amazing work and deserve that recognition. Of course, everybody's doing amazing work with these. There are a few individuals who are doing just that little something and deserve to be recognized. So congratulations to those individuals. And it looks like that's it. That's on my list. So yes, Dr. Bowenbrink. We'll get those details settled and we'll let you know by email. With that, we'll go ahead and recess. Thank you, everybody.